I actually studied abroad in Costa Rica as a student. It's longer ago than I like to admit. 1983, if you want to do the math. But I've been a faculty leader now in Costa Rica for 4 study abroad programs, a couple of the spring break, dropping the name, alternative spring breaks, and also 1 program for the College of Medicine over spring break. So I've done several types of programs. The first 2 programs were for the philosophy department. They dealt with development, healthcare, and the environment. Those were in 2005 and 2006. Now I teach in the Residential College in the Arts and Humanities, and we developed another program there. So most of what I'd like to talk about is really from this last program, the Ethics in Tourism and Sustainable Development, that we developed along with Vincent Delgado. And Vincent couldn't be here today, so all mistakes in the presentation are his. Yeah, they're his. Now here is the question Omati presented to me. How can you continue relationships with students that extend beyond the education abroad experience? And in the spirit of the election year, I'm not going to answer that question directly. Well, I am sort of. As Vince and I talked about this, one thing that became clear is that thinking about this after study abroad is not the place to start thinking about it. And that we really have to start thinking about it before the study abroad program ever takes place. The most important point here is for us, now again, the program we're running is in the residential college. The program is on ethics of ecotourism and sustainable development. It includes study of ethics of tourism and sustainable development, so that's part of an ethics component. It also includes 4 weeks of civic engagement on the part of the students. So we spend the first 4 weeks living together in one general area. The second 4 weeks, we divide the group into groups of 2 or 3 students, and they're placed in small rural communities where they're engaging with the community on a rural tourism project of some sort. And during that time, Vincent and I travel amongst those different locations to check in on the students and help them process through things. Throughout the entire 8 weeks, students are living with families. There's no time at which they're living together as a group. So we designed things. The RCH curriculum emphasizes language and culture, it emphasizes ethics, and it emphasizes civic engagement. So here you have a program in which students are studying ethics, they're working in communities, and they're operating in another language. They're living with families so they absorb another culture. The point is we designed the program to emphasize the curriculum that they're currently going through, so that before they ever go, they're familiar with these elements of the curriculum. They're engaging with them during the program, and when they return, it's still part of their curriculum. So part of the continuity there allows a natural way to engage with students after the program is actually ended. The other thing that's very important is to develop the program with personal and social development as a key objective. Our programs at MSU have an academic component, and we can't downplay that. Ours is having to do with sustainable development, ecotourism, and civic engagement. But, and this is possibly a bias from my own study abroad experience, I have no particular, well, I guess I have a hope, but I have no particular expectation that 20 years from now students will remember everything we talked about in terms of the curriculum. But I know they'll be telling stories about their engagement in Costa Rica. I'm as worried about or as concerned about how they are progressing with their own personal development and their social development as I am with their academics. That's why we do things and setting up the program. Here's sorts of things that we do. We arrange for homestays where only one student will stay with a given family. There are many opportunities to work with language schools around San Jose in which they will have one student from your program, but they'll have 2 or 3 other students from other U.S. programs. And in effect, what happens then is the student talks English all day to their families and goes out with the other American students in the evening. And if they're located fairly close, they can go out together, and we have what we call MSU South, right, which is what we want to avoid. So we arranged to have our homestays with a language school that has they actually work with Peace Corps language development, and they have worked for 30 years. Their contracts with families say that you may only have one American student staying in your home at a time. Right? So that was one thing we did. The other thing we did is arranged with several small communities for the civic engagement pieces. The kind of communities that we're dealing with here are relatively small. You wouldn't necessarily recognize it as a town or a village. There may be half a dozen houses around a square and then maybe a couple dozen more spread out over a couple of miles. If you put half a dozen or 8 students in one of those communities, you change the dynamics completely of that community. So we have limited our involvement in each community to only 2 or 3 students. That guarantees that the students are really engaging with the community and not just with each other. There are several things we do during the program in an effort to make sure we have relationships after the program. One is to build in time for the processing of the cultural experience. We start each day of class talking about how are things going in your homes. What are the challenges? What are the unexpected things, the positive things? This often can take 20 to 30 minutes. We have relatively small groups, usually 10 to 12 students. So this can take 20 to 30 minutes. Sometimes it takes more than that, but again, it's an important part of the learning. We prepare students for culture shock. And part of it, let me back up a second. Part of what we're doing here is saying, if you want to have a relationship with students after the program, you have to have a relationship with students during the program. Right? Part of that is helping them deal with the experience. They're going to be there for 8 weeks. We know from experience, I know from experience, that the first week is exciting. And sometime during the second week they go, oh shit, I'm here for another 8 weeks. Right? And it's, I won't say clockwork, but I have very few times have not seen students go through this. So we talk about this in preparation, in pre-departure. We talk about it the first week we're there, and we coach the students on how to do peer counseling with each other, to look for the signs of culture shock and prepare to, if not intervene, at least to support. Share the experience. As leaders, we are doing the same things that the students lead. When we go around to visit them in their villages, we're staying with families the same way they are. We make the same trips that they do, stay on the same buses, stay in the same places. So there's a commonality. It's not like they're having an experience and we're not having it. We share the experience so that we can relate to what they're going through, and they know that. Pay close attention to group dynamics, and I think probably what Gene's going to talk about probably is related to this. This is a hard thing to sometimes get a grip on because every group is different. I got spoiled. The first group I took to Costa Rica, 21 students, and I overheard a conversation the first day we were there, and the conversation went something like this. If we're going to be a good group, we can't click up. It's really an amazing thing to hear among students. And then throughout the semester, we were in San Jose. They had lunch on their own. I would hear things like this. Hey, I haven't had lunch with you recently. Let's go out and have lunch together. So they intentionally broke their patterns of who they relate to relate to other students. That group, 2005, still gets together. Right? They have a Facebook page. I get invited to reunions. Most of those students were pre-med students. They keep in touch about what they're doing. I still hear from them. I've gone to 2 weddings. But that wasn't something I did. That was their initiative. But I took some lessons from them and try to really encourage that sort of thing in the groups now. And prepare students for re-entry. Now I'm actually getting to the question.
He has extra time.
I go through this, and I think the students go through it too. When I go, I am prepared for an exciting experience. I am prepared, anticipate having some culture shock, even though I've done it several times. But I'm going, and I have a group of people I'm with to share it with. Returning is more disorienting. It's very disorienting to feel that familiar things are unfamiliar. Right? Which many times is the case. You come home expecting to feel like, oh, this is home, and things feel very different for you. And you're doing it alone now. Your family says, how is the experience? And they're willing to listen to you for an evening. Right? And then who do you talk to, right? So we talk to students about this, and so they can anticipate it and take some steps to ameliorate it to a certain extent. They plan on already to get together at certain points, so they know they're going to have a point where they're going to get together and talk. They set up Facebook pages or use other kinds of social media so they can connect. We talk about, how do you talk to your families and how do you sort of spread things out for them so that you're not sort of dumping your experience at one time, but divulging it over a longer course of time. And then after the program, what do we do? And maybe this is getting down to the nuts and bolts. First of all, as a faculty member, you have to take initiative. The students will get together on their own, and they'll often invite us, but you're still faculty and they're still students, and sometimes they feel uncomfortable initiating the kind of relationship they would actually like to have. So I think you have to take some initiative to open that door for them. Make it clear that you are willing to be a mentor, that you are welcome them coming and stopping in. That helps tremendously. You give them that permission. It's also very important to have students have opportunities to share with others, and this is the value of today's program, students. There are a variety of ways you can do this. We have a college-level forum, study abroad forum, where we invite students who have been on study abroad programs to talk about their experiences. This is not only helpful in terms of them processing it, but it also forces them to think about, how do I explain the experience in a fairly concise way? Right? They need to be able to do that. We talked about how you present the value to employers and other people. Getting practice presenting to groups and explain what the experience was and what are the key points is a very helpful thing, rather than just rambling. Involve them in recruitment. We involve our students in recruitment for the study abroad program, but we also involve them in recruitment for the college. So that's one of the attractive things about the college, is the emphasis on language and culture. We invite some of our students to participate when we have prospective students come to MSU. Again, this gives them opportunities to talk about that experience. And then the Office of Study Abroad essay and photo contest, we've had students do both of those and involved in those. And again, it helps them articulate that experience. Finally, we try to do, and again, we can only open the door for this, but to do individual mentoring. And that can be personal at times, a variety of things. With study abroad, you get to see students, if you're teaching on campus, you're seeing the tip of an iceberg in class, right? You're seeing a student, you're this much of a student, because you're seeing them maybe 3 hours a week, and they're seeing a bunch of students. When you spend time with them in this kind of study abroad experience, you see them at their best and their worst. They see you at their best, your best and your worst. And that, there's no substitute for that. So it opens the door for a lot of personal mentoring. And now that students have graduated, personal friendships. Academic mentoring, oftentimes the study abroad program changes their focus and they need to reorient. What do I want to do now with my academic program? And professional. We, in the earlier study abroad program, the one that focused on healthcare ethics, many of those students, 90% were actually pre-med students. So there was a lot of work with them on how to capture the experience and explain that in a medical school application, and so forth. Our program focus is a bit different now, but we've had a couple of students interested in the Peace Corps, and we're working with them. One student has been accepted to the Peace Corps. Working on them how to present that study abroad experience, particularly the civic engagement, to graduate schools and to employers. So we do work quite a bit with that. I will say it's easier for us, I think, because of the residential college setting. Students come from our program, they come back to our program. And our offices are in the same building where they're taking classes. So there's a lot of ease of interaction that makes a lot of this easy. I'll stop there.